By April 1945, the Soviet army had broken into Berlin. Above ground, the capital was crumbling under a devastating artillery siege, reduced to little more than ash and rubble. But 50 feet underground, beneath the garden of the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler was hiding in the Führerbunker. He retreated into this facility in January, entirely submerged for over 100 days. This was a fully developed subterranean fortress. While the city above lost power and starved, the bunker maintained its own electricity, active ventilation systems, running water, and stocked food storage. Inside, however, Hitler's health was failing. He suffered from severe tremors, likely symptoms of Parkinson's disease, and his grip on reality was slipping. Despite the Soviet tanks rolling over the streets above, he actively maintained the delusion that German forces could still pull off a military victory. The engineering of the bunker was almost too effective. It successfully protected his physical body from the bombs, but it completely insulated his mind from the facts of the war. When the reality of defeat finally pierced the concrete, the psychological shock was total. That shock arrived on April 28th. A radio news broadcast was intercepted and brought down into the bunker, instantly shattering the illusion that the regime could survive. The broadcast revealed a traitor, and it was the man Hitler trusted most, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and his most fiercely loyal officer. Himmler had bypassed Hitler entirely. Using a Swedish diplomat as an intermediary, he had reached out to the Allies with an offer to surrender to the Western powers, Britain and America, while continuing to fight the Soviet Union in the East. The news triggered an explosive reaction. Trembling with rage, Hitler instantly stripped Himmler of all his titles and marked his most faithful officer for execution, ordering anyone who found him to shoot him on sight. Himmler's defection confirmed what the incoming artillery fire already suggested. The loyalist inner circle had collapsed. Hitler was finally out of options, out of allies, and utterly trapped. On April 29th, with his military options completely exhausted, Hitler turned his attention to a bizarre sequence of domestic and administrative paperwork. In a midnight civil ceremony held right inside the bunker, he married his longtime companion, Eva Braun. After the wedding, he sat with his secretary to dictate his final political will and testament. He was drafting the legal boundaries of an empire that no longer existed. He expelled the traitors from the party and divided his own power in two. He appointed Joseph Goebbels as chancellor and named this man, Karl Dönitz, as the new president. Dönitz was the chief of the German Navy. Because he was stationed in the north, far from the political infighting and treason of Berlin, Hitler calculated that he was the only remaining officer loyal enough to handle the surrender. Even with enemy forces literally fighting a few blocks away, Hitler spent his final hours obsessing over bureaucratic revenge, punishing disloyal friends, and legally engineering his succession. His exit strategy was driven by terror over what happened to his ally, Benito Mussolini. Mussolini was executed, his body transported to Milan, hung upside down, and mutilated by a mob. Hitler refused to let his body become a public spectacle. By the morning of April 30th, an eerie quiet settled over the bunker. Hitler gathered his remaining staff for brief farewells, and around 3 p.m., he and Eva locked the heavy doors to their private quarters. At approximately 3:30 p.m., the staff outside heard a single gunshot. When they opened the door, they found Eva Braun dead from cyanide poisoning, and Hitler dead from a self-inflicted bullet wound to the head. Following his strict final orders, loyal SS officers carried the two bodies up the stairs into the ruined Chancellery garden, doused them heavily in petrol, and set them on fire. Destroying his own remains was his ultimate act of control. He ensured that advancing Soviet troops could never mount his corpse as a trophy of war. The regime evaporated immediately. Goebbels killed himself and his family the very next day, and by May 8th, Karl Dönitz officially signed the unconditional surrender of the German forces. When Soviet forces fully secured Berlin, they immediately occupied the ruined grounds of the Reich Chancellery and the bunker below it. In the garden, they discovered the burned remains. Rather than showing them to the world, the Soviet command deliberately chose to hide the evidence. Instead, they launched a massive disinformation campaign. They fed the international press conflicting rumors, sometimes claiming Hitler had escaped in a submarine, other times suggesting he was hiding in Argentina. By intentionally weaponizing the absence of a public corpse, the Soviets created deep geopolitical confusion. They kept their Western allies guessing, but in doing so, they inadvertently birthed survival conspiracy theories that persist to this day. But the myth of his escape is entirely false, debunked when hard forensic evidence left in the garden. This diagram illustrates the definitive proof: dental records. Soviet investigators captured Hitler's dentist and his assistants, who successfully matched the charred jaw fragments found outside the bunker to his extensive dental history. The Soviets kept these remains highly classified, secretly moving them between various military installations over the next few decades to prevent them from ever becoming a shrine. In 1970, the KGB executed a secret operation to dig up the materials, incinerate them into fine ash, and scatter them into a flowing river. Hitler spent his final hours obsessively orchestrating his death to control his historical legacy. But in the end, his enemies literally washed his remains out of existence, leaving behind no grave, no monument, and nothing but the ghosts of a conspiracy.